Welcome to KU Padasala. My name is Chad A. Haag. I am an author and former teacher from the United States of America, and I am very excited today to have the opportunity to discuss with you the very important topic of German for reading knowledge. In this fifth unit, we will move on to the topic of regular verb conjugation. But what is conjugation? Well, you might recall from earlier within the course, we defined conjugation as the adjustment of the form of a verb to reflect certain things like the following. You need to change the form of a verb to reflect which person is being referenced. Now, we have the first person, which is I in the singular, but it's we in the plural. You have the third person, which is he, she, or it in the singular, but that's they in the plural. So in addition to reflecting person, we also have to reflect things like number. In modern English, for example, we have only singular and plural, but you may be surprised to know that in Old English, there were actually three different grammatical numbers which nouns or pronouns could have reflected on a morphological level. There was also a dual number in which you're talking about a pair of things, like maybe a pair of eyes, a pair of twins, we two, things like that. So we have to change the form of the verb in German much more explicitly than we would in modern English to take account of things like that. But it's not just person and number. It's also things like tense. We have the present, the past, and the future, and we've already learned the past and present for one verb, but in a certain sense, sein is both the place which it's necessary for us to begin with, but also kind of a lousy place for us to begin because it's so irregular. And you'll find that a lot of the things you learned about the way that sein functions will be quite different from those of the more regular verbs. Well, in this lesson, we're going to focus on those regular verbs. Now, sein is once again the place where you have to begin because it's so commonly used. It's so important to be able to attribute adjectives to a noun or to form equation statements in where you say, for example, the man is a doctor, in much the same way that an equal sign in mathematics tells you that two different expressions refer to the same thing. So it's where we have to begin, but you may have noticed that the infinitive form even of sein is irregular in the sense that the other infinitives we've encountered in, for example, the unit on those neuter nouns, which are derived from the infinitive form of verbs, turn into a noun through having statements like, for example, das Sein itself. Well, the other examples actually had different infinitive endings. And that is what we're going to focus on at the beginning of this lesson itself. Now, the infinitive in German, with the exception of sein, it typically can be identified through that en suffix. Okay, and it's precisely that en suffix which is going to be dropped from the infinitive form to give you what is called the root or the stem, to which you will add endings to reflect things like person, number, tense. Later on we'll deal with mood. For example, making indicative descriptions of things that are factually the case might be the norm, but it was not the only mood or attitude you can have towards what to the use of a verb to what is being talked about within that verb. You can also use it hypothetically in the case of the subjunctive. You can give commands that action be done in the case of the imperative, but before we can get to that, we have to deal with the maybe purified default form of the verb, the form of the verb before any adjustments have been made in conjugation, and that is the infinitive. Once again, we can typically identify it within German through the en ending, with the exception of sein. And we're going to take a look now at a whole list of infinitive verbs in German, many of which you will be able to deduce the meaning of simply through seeing them. Many of these are cognates of English. So I'll show you the first example how this works by filling in the answer for you, but all the others I'm going to ask you to try to deduce them. Now, the first infinitive on this list is beginnen, which is quite literally the same as begin with the addition of the in suffix to indicate that it is in the infinitive. Now, how do we determine that something is in the infinitive in English? We don't use an ending, rather we use something before, and it's actually just a preposition. We just use the preposition to begin to show that it's in the infinitive. So you should maybe think of to and n as being equivalents from German to English. So the next infinitive on this list is bringen. Once again, I'll leave it up to you to guess what that is. Enden, fallen, finden, geben, gewinnen, hängen, helfen, hochen, kommen, kosten, landen, lernen, scheinen, schwimmen, senden, singen, sinken, sitzen, springen, starten, stinken, stolpen, trinken, wandern, waschen. So you were probably able to deduce the English translation of these words just from either looking at them or hearing them. Let's go through those, and as we do so, I'd like you to pronounce with me. Beginnen is to begin. Bringen is to bring. Enden is to end. Fallen is to fall. Finden is to find. Geben is to give. Gewinnen is to win. Hängen is to hang. Helfen is to help. Hören is to hear. Kommen is to come. Kosten is to cost. Landen is to land. Learnen is to learn. Shinen is to shine. And by shine, I don't mean shining somebody's shoes, for a fee on the street. You see people like that in, say, New York City, they'll shine your shoes for a fee. I'm not talking about that kind of shining. I'm talking about the shining of the sun. The sun shines, and this is also the word for related to appearance. Martin Heidegger makes a big deal about that which shines forth is merely an appearance, but it might also be deceptive. But for the moment, we'll just realize that shinen means to shine, also related to the notion of appearing. Schwimmen is to swim. Senden is to send. Singen is to sing. Sinken is to sink. Now, why is it sinken, not sinken? In German, the single S has a Z sound, whereas the double S, often represented by a letter we do not have in the English language, which looks kind of like a capital B, that's the sound for S rather than Z. So this is sinken, which is to sink. Sitzen is to sit. Springen is to jump. Now, this is something which we have kind of a remnant of when we talk about the springs in a certain device. Like, there are springs in a toy which allow it to jump, or in German, to springen, right? So we have starten as to start, stinken as to stink, stoppen as to stop, trinken as to drink, wandern as to wander, and waschen as to wash. Now, I mentioned a few lectures ago that those German infinitives which end in ieren, spelled I-E-R-E-N, are oftentimes even closer to the English than the examples we just considered. I don't even need to provide you the English translation of the following words. For just looking at them, you will know exactly what they mean. And this is because, honestly, a lot of these words you'll find are actually coming not purely from Germanic roots, but rather from the classical languages of the West, such as Greek and Latin. Analysieren, for example, is obviously to analyze, but analysis itself comes from Greek. Luo is the classic first verb to learn in Greek Bible study, or a biblical scholarship class. If you go to Bible college as a pastor in the United States, the first Greek term you learn to be able to read the New Testament in Koine Greek is the verb for loosening, dissolving, destroying, etc., depending on context. So analysis is the act of understanding something through breaking it up into its indivisible, undecomposable basic units. But analysis is something which we get into German and English from Greek. That's why analysieren is going to be about identical for both languages. We also have argumentieren, debattieren, demonstrieren, dokumentieren, dominieren, evacuieren, evaluieren, fotografieren, funktionieren, informieren, investieren, kombinieren, kommentieren, komplimentieren, komplizieren, nominieren, protestieren, qualifizieren, quantifizieren, rationalisieren, reparieren, studieren, and trainieren. However, it's not enough to remain at the level of the infinitive. We have to be able to do more with verbs than just leave them in their default state. We have to now begin the process of learning how to conjugate regular verbs rather than the highly irregular verb sein to the most basic tense, which is the present tense. Now, you'll find that sagen, or to say, makes a very good candidate to show you how conjugation normally works within German. It's certainly a much better candidate than the highly irregular verb sein. For here, you can more easily identify the tendency for a German verb to have the en suffix dropped from its infinitive, and then to have the personal endings added on to that stem. So here the infinitive is sagen. If we drop the en, we get zog, and then we can add the following endings for the persons and number considerations within the traditional paradigm. We have ich sage. Here the ending is e, which is I say. Du sagst. Here the ending is st, much like we already saw with du bist. This is you say in the sense of the informal singular you. Then we have sie/es sagt with the t ending for he, she, or it says. In the plural we have wir sagen, which looks basically just like the infinitive for we say. We have ihr sagt with a T for you all say when you're addressing a group of people. And we have sie sagen and sie sagen as they say and you say formal. The only difference is that one has a lowercase s, the other has a capital letter S. So repeat after me, or say with me rather. We'll go through this one more time. Ich sage is I say. Du sagst is you say, informal singular. Sie/es sagt. He/she/it says. Wir sagen is we say. Ihr sagt is you all say. Sie sagen is they say. And Sie sagen is you say formal. Another regular verb which follows slightly different rules because of the way that it is formulated in terms of the pronounceability of the particular sounds which are combined is antworten. And that's why it's typical to learn sagen and antworten together, which are also usefully say and answer. Antworten, or to answer, is the infinitive form. If we drop the en ending, we move from infinitive to the verb stem, to which we can add the following endings. We have ich antworte, with that traditional e ending for I answer. Then we have du antwortest with the st at the end, but with that e as something of a phonetic cushion, which allows us to pronounce the word more easily than if it was missing. Du antwortest is you answer, informal singular you. Sie/es antwortet. Here we have that T, but we also have an E as a cushion between the first T and the second T, which makes it pronounceable. And we have the plurals, wir antworten, which is very similar to the infinitive, ihr antwortet, which is you all answer as a group of people, and then sie antworten and sie antworten as they answer and you answer, formal you, respectively. Once again, say with me, ich antworte is I answer, du antwortest is you answer, informal you, sie/es antwortet as he, she, or it answers. Wir antworten is we answer. Ihr antwortet is you all answer. And sie antworten and sie antworten are they answer and you answer, formal you, respectively. However, when we talk about the present tense, it is somewhat ambiguous within English which one we're talking about, because there's basically 3 present tenses in English. You may have noticed that all of the following are present tense, despite the fact that we might think of them as, I guess you can say, being different tenses. Well, as far as the tense goes, they're all in the present, because tense only tells you about time, whether it's in the past, the present, or the future. They are, however, combined with different what might be called aspects or moods to give you the present tense plus some other thing in addition to it. For example, if I simply say I answer, then I'm giving you the simple present. But if I say that I am answering, I'm trying to put this into a certain progressive aspect form combined with the present tense, which is trying to communicate the ongoing continuous nature of it. Yes, I am answering the question right now, still caught up in the process of doing so. However, if I say I do answer, that's also technically in the present tense, but here I have what is called by linguists the emphatic mood, in which I'm giving you the same action. It's just answering in either case, but by adding do, I'm trying to place more emphasis on that action. Okay, so once again, we have the simple present, I answer, the present progressive, I am answering, and the emphatic present, I do answer in English, but in German there's really just the one present tense. All of these in German could be translated as ich antworte. So the challenge as you are reading in German and presumably translating into English is realizing that as you are taking something you encounter in German and try to make it comprehensible in English, you really do have all 3 of these options available all the time. Context will determine which of these you should prefer. However, we have to move on to the problem of another irregular verb within the German language, which is haben. Now, haben, quite predictably, is the German word for to have. It's very similar to the English word. And have is something that we understand to be highly irregular in English too, but also very necessary to learn very early on in your education because it is so often used. Have is a word which has more than one function in the sense that you do use it to talk about something that you possess. For example, yes, I have this laptop, I have this mouse, these are things that I own, but I can also use it to perform certain grammatical functions, like, say, putting things in the past tense. If I want to talk about what I have done in the past, here have is not really functioning as a literal description of possession. Rather, I am using it as an auxiliary or helper verb to accomplish the function of putting some other verb into a different tense. And so too, you have haben function as that sort of past tense auxiliary verb within German, which makes it so important to learn early on. Now, it's not nearly as irregular as a verb like, say, sein, far from it. So this will be easy after especially learning the regular verb conjugation of sagen and antworten. So the infinitive is haben. If we drop the en ending, we are now moving from the infinitive to the stem, and we add the following endings. As you can see, just say with me, ich habe is I have, du hast is you have, singular and informal you, sie/es hat is he, she, or it has. Wir haben is we have. Once again, the we form looks a lot like the infinitive. Ihr habt is you all have. And sie haben and sie haben are both they have and you formal have, respectively. We can tell the difference because one is lowercase s, the other is capital S. But now that we have the ability to talk about having, I can ask you the following question. Hast du eine große Familie? Hast du eine große Familie? Well, we know some of these words. Du hast is you have in the informal singular sense. And the inversion that places the verb before the subject tells us this is a question. And we know that große is the adjective for large. We remember gross domestic product. A movie grossed so much money. Gross really just means it's referring to something that is large or great. So I'm asking, do you have a large family? Well, you can answer that question, but in order to do so, we have to learn some other vocabulary. For example, you need numbers to tell me how exactly it is that your family is large. Let's just say you do have a large family because you have a lot of cousins. Well, you can only really tell me how many cousins you have if we learn some numbers. So we're going to pause now and do exactly that. Now, the numbers in particular are very similar between German and English because English was originally a Germanic language and only later came to have a French influence after the Norman invasion in the 11th century. So the rule of thumb we learned in the first video is that those very, very basic everyday words are more likely to be Germanic in origin, whereas those more artificially, scholarly, legalistic, etc. formal words are more likely to be French in origin, and the numbers are very, very basic words, some of the most basic words that you use on a daily basis. So die Zahlen, or the numbers, include the following. 0 is 0. 1 is 1. 2 is 2. 3 is 3. 4 is 4. 5 is 5. 6 is 6. I want to mention that this is sechs with a Z sound, not sex with an S sound. You might remember the National Lampoon movie, quite frankly, where he goes to a hotel in Germany as an American tourist, and he's given hotel room number 6, but he can't find it because he doesn't speak German, so he knocks on doors saying, excuse me, my family and I are looking for sex, can you help us? It's a joke about the play on words with the sound of the German word 6, but that's actually wrong. It's sechs with a Z sound, so 6 is sechs, 7 is sieben, 8 is acht, 9 is 9, and 10 is 10. Once again, say with me, die Zahlen or numbers are 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, and 10, 10. But of course we want to count far beyond just 10, so we'll learn 11 is 11, 12 is 12, 13 is 13, 14 is 14, 15 is 15, 16 is 16, 17 is 17, 18 is 18, 19 is 19, 20 is 20, and 21 is 21. Now we find here that the convention is a little bit different with regard to how the order of 20 and 1 would be relative to English. In English, of course, it's 20 first and 1 second. In German, it's rather 1 and, literally the word und, 20, 21, rather than, as would be the case in English, 21. And move on to numbers 30 to 200. 30 is 30, 40 is 40, 50 is 50, 60 is 60, 70 is 70, 80 is 80, 90 is 90, and 100 is 100. As you could guess, 200 is 200. But what if we want some numbers in between 30 and 40? Well, we learn that the convention we learned with 21 applies here just as well. So for 32, we know 30 is 30 and 2 is 2 and is an. So 32 is 2 and 30. 32. 44 similarly is 44. 55 is 55. 66 is 66. 77 is 77. 88 is 88. 99 is 99, and 101 is 101, with und in parentheses to indicate the optionality. 1000 is 1000. Okay, so now that we have numbers, we can talk about how large your family is, but don't we need to know a little bit more about who's in your family to be able to do that? Well, we have the following family vocabulary, which we will consider in order for you to be able to tell me how large your family is. So the family is die Familie, very similar to English. Der Bruder is brother. Das Einzelkind is the only child. Die Eltern are parents. Das Enkelkind is the grandchild. Das Familienmitglied is a family member. Die Frau is a wife. Now we know that's also the word for a woman, but it is also the word for a wife. Die Geschwister is siblings. Die Großmutter is grandmother. Well, we know groß is great, so a grandmother is literally a great mother. Die Oma is another word for grandmother, while der Großvater is particularly the grandfather, while der Opa is another word for that. Das Kind, we know, is the child. Der Mann is the man, but it's also the word for husband. Die Mutter, we know, is mother. And if you want to talk about an uncle being on a mother's side rather than a father's side, you could clarify by saying Mutterlicherseits. Seit gives us side. Mutterlich, well, lich is that adverb which in English would be li, so the motherly side basically is Mutterlicherseits. Der Onkel is the uncle, very close to English. Die Schwester is the sister. Der Sohn is the son. Die Tante is an aunt. Die Tochter is the daughter. Der Vater is the father. Väterlicherseits is on the father's side, much like Mutterlicherseits is for the mother's side. Now, if we talk about a relative generically speaking, this is either der Verwandte or die Verwandte, whether it is male or female, we know that based on the form of the definite article being der or die. Now your cousins are der Cousin, if male, and die Cousine, if female. So now that we have numbers, and now that we have family vocabulary, you can tell me if you have a large family. Hast du eine große Familie? Now go ahead and pause the tape here and write down your answer. Make note of things like how many uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters you have, using the numbers we've learned. And if you're really feeling ambitious, you could talk about how old some of them are. But we haven't yet really learned how to talk about that in the sense of we haven't learned yet how to ask somebody's age. Well, now that we have the vocabulary for most of the numbers from 1 to 1,000 at least we're able to form now, we can begin asking questions like wie alt bist du? Well, we know wie is how, alt is old, and du bist is you are. Now this is put in an inverted form to show that it's a question. So if I ask wie alt bist du, now you can tell me. Ich bin 18 Jahre alt. For example, I am 18 years old. Ich bin, remember, I be, basically bin is like the English word be, it's I am. 8 is 8, 10 is 10. Jahre is years, and alt is old. All right, so I'll go ahead and try this as an example to show you how this works. I will answer the question. Ich habe 2 Schwestern und ein Bruder. Okay, ich habe 2 Schwestern, 2 sisters, und ein Bruder, 1 brother. Ich habe 4 Onkel und 5 Tanten. 4 uncles and 5 aunts. Ich habe 30 Cousins. I have 30 cousins. Mein Bruder heißt John und ist 30 Jahre alt. My brother is named John and he's 30 years old. So much like that, I want you to now try this activity, and this will conclude this lesson. I look forward to rejoining you in lesson 6.